First international break of the season. It's usually a bit of a calmness. Everything's settled down. The transfer window has closed, but this is Manchester United, and my God, no, it's definitely not calming down. It's absolutely crazy right now with United, bringing you all the news here on the United Stand. I'm back. I've had my holiday. Cheers for all the well wishes, everybody. We're getting straight into it. There's no time to waste. We've got to get into the stuff that's really important for the football club right now. Everything that's going on behind the scenes, because obviously, like I said, no international break. You'd have thought it'd have been a bit quiet, but unfortunately for us, being United fans, we have to deal with an awful lot more. I'm here with Rob Dawson from ESPN to go over all of this. Rob, sadly, it is always you that comes at the bad time, and we are talking about negative sort of news around United. But I just wanted to ask you straight off the bat, first of all, mate. You've covered United for a long time. You've had some crazy summers, transfer windows. Where does this one compare? Because it's had everything.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, you just said there that international breaks are meant to be quiet, and they are. And I said to someone on Sunday morning before the Arsenal game, I said, I think work might be quite quiet the next couple of weeks, and it's just been completely the opposite. We've been through these kind of periods before with Man United where it just feels like they lurch from crisis to crisis, but this is right up there, this period of time, with the things that are going on, the things that are continuing at the moment. It's definitely right up there with the periods of time that I've covered United.
That's it. It's just like if United fans are stuck on Twitter waiting for the next bit of bad news to break. Whether it's an injury to a player, we've got that to deal with. We'll talk about that. But obviously the hot topic at the moment is regarding Jadon Sancho. Ten Hag, again, going hard on a player, it would seem. In terms of the whole situation, we'll talk about where we're at and everything right now. But before this all broke, was there any sign from you and reports about things that weren't right behind the scenes? Was there anything before this all broke out? Or was it like it was for us, just bang?
Well, I mean, there have been whispers. I mean, obviously everyone will know what happened with Jadon Sancho last season. Yeah. That his form dipped, his level in training dropped, and Ten Hag took the decision to put his arm around him to find out what was going on. They took a tough decision, I think, to let him spend time away from the club in the hope that that would rectify the situation. Obviously away at a period of time where there was quite a busy schedule of fixtures, you know, players were coming back from the World Cup very tired. It wasn't ideal at all, but they prioritised Jadon Sancho's physical and mental well-being over all of that. And I think the hope was at that point that they would be repaid. There have been whispers behind the scenes, nothing massive, but whispers that, you know, Ten Hag has been a little bit frustrated with the fact that his levels can dip quite a lot, you know, from game to game. I think fans will have seen that just watching the games anyway, but also behind the scenes when the team are training. You know, training sessions that fans don't get to see, that Ten Hag demands a certain standard every single day. It's the reason why Bruno Fernandes is captain. You know, there's a lot of questions about why Bruno was picked to be captain. It's because his level and his commitment every day, whether it's a match or in training, is exactly the same, and that's something that Ten Hag values, and that's not really been the case with Sancho. We asked Ten Hag in the summer when we were away in America about Sancho, and he said that he was in a good moment, that his mood was good, he was training well, and that suggested that, you know, maybe that was going to be a little bit of a turning point with his United career, and everyone was kind of expecting him to kick on, and I just don't really think that it's happened like that. I mean, I think most fans would agree that his performances, just in isolation this season, haven't really been fantastic, and then obviously you get the bombshell that he's not in the squad for Arsenal. And the reason behind that is that Ten Hag thinks he's not been training well, which really for a professional footballer is probably about the worst thing you can hear from your manager. And we're in a situation now where you'd have to think that Jadon Sancho is battling to save his Man United career, and the whole situation, particularly because it's being played out in public, is extremely messy.
Yeah, well, welcome to the Members Club, Sammy, as well. Do click on that membership button next to the subscribe button, the join button, if you want that extra content from the United Stand, and get your questions in as well, everybody. We're here to answer them as much as we can. In terms of Jadon Sancho, the stance that he has took, were you surprised that he actually came out public?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of this that surprised me.
And the speed of everything, where it moves.
Yeah, I mean, there are two ways of looking at this. I'm sure that some Man United fans will be looking at this and saying, well, if there's a disagreement between a player and the manager, if the manager doesn't feel like a player is training well enough, then that needs to be kept in-house. That conversation is had in the office. You know, fair enough that he doesn't travel to Arsenal. You know, tell him that you've not been training well enough. You're not in the squad for Arsenal, but it's kept there. So you have to question whether Ten Hag's approach to that has been correct, because it's his choice to make that public that he's not been training well enough. Then you've got Jadon Sancho. You hear that, presumably you hear that, you know, through social media and on the TV, and then you've got a decision then about whether you want to respond publicly or privately, and has obviously decided to do it publicly. Again, there'll be some Man United fans saying, well, you know, if Ten Hag is allowed to make that public, then Jadon Sancho's got a platform with millions of followers. He's more than entitled to make his case on social media and do it publicly, which he has done. Personally, I don't think that is the right response. If Ten Hag had said that about Sancho and then Sancho hadn't responded, I'm not sure it would have developed into this huge, big issue that it has done. The issue now is that it's a very, very public rift that Jadon Sancho essentially has called Ten Hag a liar. You know, he said that it's not that he was training poorly, and it kind of hinted that there were other reasons behind him being dropped for the Arsenal game. It's very, very tricky now, because it's really a very public challenge to Ten Hag's authority. And I'm sure we'll talk later on that the one thing that Ten Hag has done since he came to Old Trafford was try to instill some discipline, and that is regardless of the stature and the career that a player's had. He's done it with Rashford, he's done it with Garnacho, with Ronaldo, obviously. And now people are kind of waiting to see how he's going to deal with this with Jadon Sancho, because unless there's some kind of grovelling apology from Sancho, I don't see how this gets rectified. I can't for the life of me see that Ten Hag is going to back down and say, oh, you know, it's a miscommunication. You know, something was kind of lost in translation a little bit, because ultimately, journalists, me and the other journalists who follow the team, were asking that question on Sunday night and said, you know, does Eric want to clarify this? Obviously, it's caused a big fuss. Does he want to clarify it? And the message we got back from United was no, that he sent a very, very clear message, a message that he meant to do. So certainly can't see Ten Hag backing down. You know, Jadon Sancho's statement is still there. It's not like it's a rush of blood and he's typed something out dead quick because he's angry and posted it and then gone, oh, I can't believe I've done that, and deleted it. It's still there. So, you know, it seems on the face of it right now that both sides are refusing to back down, which again makes a very messy situation even worse.
Were you at the press conference after the Arsenal game?
No, I didn't do the Arsenal game.
So basically, it was broken down. Ten Hag was asked about Jadon Sancho. He's not made a point of bringing Sancho into a conversation deliberately. He was asked a question and he just honestly answered it.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, the difficulty was that the question about Jadon Sancho's absence was asked during the game to Man United. And usually in those situations, you know, if a team turn up at a game and you know, I don't know, say, you know, Rashford's not there, usually United will say, oh, Marcus is ill, or he got an injury yesterday, not with the team, not serious, but, you know, feel free to ask the manager afterwards. So that question was asked of Man United during the game on Sunday. People, I think, were expecting the answer back, oh, he's got a little twinge, he's picked up a knock, he's not fit. The answer that came back was the manager will address that after the game, which is very, very unusual, which suggests to me that there was something bigger afoot. Again, though, I can understand what you're saying about that Ten Hag hasn't, you know, walked out in front of the cameras and deliberately thrown Sancho under the bus, but he didn't have to answer in that way. He could have quite easily said, I don't know, had a twinge, not quite right, something just to play it down. I think we all know that Ten Hag is a very, very honest individual. I think the question probably has to be asked, you know, whether that was the right time to do it. That said, on the flip side of that, you know, maybe this is the tip of the iceberg. You know, there have been whispers and rumours a little bit about Sancho's levels in training. Maybe that conversation has been had in the office 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Maybe Ten Hag has got so sick of it, he thought, well, this is the only way I can try and get through to you. I'm going to say it, I'm going to tell everyone in public what's been going on. So until you actually know the proper details of what's happening, we probably won't know until the press conference before the Brighton game, because so far everyone's keeping quite tight-lipped about it.
That's it. There, it's interesting. So it's like it's key to see how that was all broke down, because I was under the assumption that the question was asked straight to that Ten Hag. It's interesting to get your input on that, Robin, like how that was broke down. So Ten Hag knew that question was. Ten Hag pretty much set the question up essentially for everyone to speak about this after the game. He's probably hoping for a better result.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to answer it in such negative sort of circumstances after that Arsenal game. But that's how it was brought out. It was Ten Hag pretty much leveraged that, and he was ready for answering that question. Like you said, I can only, from what I've known, when we've been in the press conferences and when we spoke to Ten Hag and how he answers and how he shuts journalists down sometimes if you don't ask the right question, he pretty much...
He's been very mindful in the past. He's been very mindful in the past of what he said. But I don't get the impression at all that Ten Hag has ever spoken to journalists, whether it's in front of the camera or not, without knowing or meaning what he said. And, you go back to... just injuries this season, for example, that you got Malacia and Shaw who were injured. United, on the manager's request, have been okay about saying this player is now injured and he's not available for this many games or a few weeks or whatever. They did it with Shaw and Malacia, as I said, and also did it with Mason Mount, but haven't wanted to disclose the nature of injuries, which again is fair enough. But it shows how much control Ten Hag has of those situations that that's even a consideration for Man United. And when you get situations like this with Sancho, because you know in the past that he's had a lot of control over these kinds of situations, you have to take it all at face value. You have to believe that he's done that for a reason. And it does look brutal. It does. There's no two ways of saying it. To say that about a player in a post-match press conference is brutal. But from what I know of Ten Hag and having been around him for the last year, he will have done it for a reason.
Yeah. Question in from Nicholas with a super chat. Cheers for that, Nicholas. Surely the club can force Sancho to take the post down. I'd be fuming if I was Ten Hag for a lack of backing from the club. Well, you just talked about backing there, actually, Robin, what the club is. I mean, has anyone asked the question if this will be taken down? Has anyone asked United? Like, you said that everyone's tight-lipped about it, but the process now is it right that Ten Hag has gone away for a few days? Obviously, Jadon Sancho isn't on international duty. This is going to come to a head quite quickly, isn't it, at Carrington?
Yeah, so Ten Hag was away for a few days. It wasn't a case that they were both back at Carrington on the Monday, kind of going face to face. The players who weren't on international duty were given a bit of time off. Obviously, it's an easy time to give those players a little bit of a break. As far as things stand, Ten Hag and Sancho are due back at Carrington before the rest of the internationals to begin training, and that's when it will be dealt with. As I say, the problem that United have got is that as things stand, both of them are standing by what they've said. United have been asked whether Ten Hag wants to clarify his comments, and they've said no. Jadon Sancho has the option to delete that post. He has the option to write another post and say, heat of the moment, really sorry, took it really badly. All I want to do is play for United. I've apologised to the manager. That's the end of it. Really, really sorry to everyone. And he hasn't. It's still there. It's pinned to the top of his Twitter feed. It's been viewed 60-odd million times. If he was sorry and thought it was a mistake, I think we probably would have heard about it by now.
Yeah. For me personally, looking at this as a fan, I don't see any way back for Jadon Sancho from this. From what you were saying there, the fact that he's pinned the tweet at the top, he's not removing the tweet. Everything, I look at it as like everything and all the time and effort that Ten Hag, and you mentioned this just a moment ago, he has given to Sancho, letting him have that time off, nearly 3 months I think it was, in a very busy period when we were literally clinging on to any play that we possibly could because we had the sheer amount of games that were piling up, Europe and at home as well. So I can only look at it and say, look, Ten Hag has, like you said, he's had this conversation with Jadon continuously, and he keeps getting let down and he just give up. He basically had enough. That's how it seems to me. And I just don't see... I mean, can you see a way back? Like, Ten Hag, you know how he is. We've seen what happened with Ronaldo. We've seen what he did with Rashford, Harry Maguire. He's not one to hide away, and he likes to be in control, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, just first on that giving Sancho a break last season is really significant. There's a couple of us who had a conversation with people at United before the World Cup and were invited in basically to talk about how they were going to handle the World Cup. And the message that came back from United was that in those games after the World Cup, immediately after Qatar, that they were going to rely very, very heavily on the players who weren't going to go. So the likes of at that time, Sancho was still at the club. And so they'd already made a plan to rely very heavily on the core of players who weren't going to go to Qatar. One of those, obviously, at that time was Sancho. And you think about that period after the World Cup, the first game back was a League Cup game against Burnley, I think.
Yeah.
And you know how how much the winning the League Cup last season has kind of lifted the entire season and lifted Ten Hag. So ultimately, Ten Hag has risked getting knocked out of a cup competition that was very winnable, clearly, because he won it, by saying to Jadon, you know, it's all right, we know you're struggling, you go away and don't come back until you're ready. I'm sure that he would have loved to have Sancho available for those games, because it was particularly hectic. You know, you got a lot of players who were coming back from Qatar really, really tired, and the club didn't want to rely on them. They wanted to rely on the core of players who had stayed behind. But Ten Hag prioritised Jadon Sancho over the season almost. I know that's a massive shout to make, and it's not as simple as that, clearly, but you are risking losing some of those games because you haven't got a player like Sancho available, and they prioritised Sancho. So it's easy to see when you have a situation like this with Sancho, where you can understand that Ten Hag and his coaching staff are looking at this and going, we feel quite let down by this now. Like, we went out on a limb for you last season. We risked, you know, losing games that we couldn't afford to lose because we wanted to make sure you were okay, and now you've kind of responded to this situation in the worst way possible, which is making your grievance public. So in terms of, is there a way back, you really struggle to see that there is. As I said before, Ten Hag has been really, really strict on discipline. You know, he's dropped Marcus Rashford for a game at Wolves because he was a couple of minutes late for a team meeting. They reprimanded Garnacho on the pre-season tour in Australia and Thailand. Obviously, the thing with Ronaldo ended up with Ronaldo having his contract cancelled by mutual consent. The problem is with this entire thing now is that if you're looking for examples in the past to compare this to, the easiest one to do is the Ronaldo situation, because Marcus Rashford being late for a team meeting isn't a direct challenge to Ten Hag's authority. He's made a mistake. It's not allowed. It's a lack of discipline, but you know, you've not challenged the manager's authority. Ronaldo did in an interview and said that he didn't respect Ten Hag, and the result of that was that a couple of weeks later his contract was cancelled and he's out the door. This is the most similar. It's not the same, obviously, but it's the most similar situation to that. And if you take Ten Hag's hardline approach and add it to this, you know, how can Sancho come back? You know, if discipline is really the biggest thing that he wants to instill in his squad, and he wants to remind everyone that he's the man in charge, which he has done since the moment he walked through the door, you know, really, you have to think that Sancho is going to struggle to play now between now and the opening of the January window, and then in January the club are going to listen to offers for him. Unless there's going to be some kind of grovelling apology from Sancho, which again I can't see for the reasons we mentioned before. But unless that's going to happen, I can't see that there really is a way back for him now.
No, a couple of super chats here. One from Chunk says, seen a 70 million performance from Sancho in a United shirt? ? No. Since his pathetic, stroppy performance in the FA Cup final versus City, totally fed up with him. Garnacho, Palestra, Diallo all look better anyway. I'll quickly ask you that, or I'll just get on to another super chat there, Rob. Is there any sort of like, I asked you this in terms of like, at the start of the show, has there been any sign that this might have been happening? Because it was heavily rumoured while we was on tour that Facundo Palestra was going to go out on loan. The more you look into it, you sort of start dotting I's, crossing T's. It's like, could there have been something in the making here with Sancho? Because he hasn't featured much from the start of the season. Yeah. Palestra staying at the club, things like this happening. It just looks like something was bubbling a little bit. Possibly.
I mean, the message that came back in the summer was that they were quite happy with him for the most part. As I say, that we asked Ten Hag in a press conference, I think, and he said that he was in a good mood and that he was happy with his performances. We also asked, you'll remember that he played as a false nine in a couple of those games, and we asked the club whether that was just because he was filling in a gap or whether it was a genuine plan heading into the season. And again, the message came back was that it was Ten Hag's idea because it was a genuine thought that they had maybe for this season that might work with Sancho as a false nine. So obviously they had him included in their plans. Yeah, I mean, there has been a bit of rumour and a bit of speculation all the way through his time at United that, you know, maybe his level, particularly in training, is not great every single day, and he's kind of had to be reminded that at United that is the kind of level you need to hit every single day, and that's what the manager, particularly this manager, expects of you. Again, you know, from knowing Ten Hag and having dealt with him for a year, he doesn't say things that he doesn't mean. There will be a reason why he's decided to go public with that. I don't think he's the type of manager particularly that that would throw players under the bus. I mean, he didn't do it particularly with Ronaldo, even before he ended up leaving the club. And there was a couple of times where he thought, I imagine that Ten Hag quite annoyed with Ronaldo with that, and he didn't. I'm fairly certain that there will be a very, very valid reason for Ten Hag taking the approach he has done.
Yeah, another chat here from Sachin says, including Sancho back without a public apology from him is a bad example and will encourage other players to behave like this and endanger our manager.
He's right. I mean, that's exactly right. That comment basically encapsulates the problem that Ten Hag has got.
At the club, yeah.
Yeah, it has, because, just to go back to that Wolves game that Marcus was dropped for, he's in a great goal-scoring run at that time. United needed to win that game. It was a hard game away at Wolves. They're always tight games at Wolves. It would have been very easy for Ten Hag to go, Marcus, come on, but actually we need you for this game, so I'm going to kind of overlook that and you can start. And he didn't. Again, he risked the result against Wolves to make a point to the squad by using Rashford to tell the whole squad that it's not acceptable, whoever you are, that you're going to be late for a team meeting. And the fact that he dropped him to the bench showed everyone that he was willing to risk that result against Wolves to show the entire group that no one is above the law. And really, missing a team meeting or missing the start of a team meeting by a couple of minutes because you overslept is child's play compared to this with Sancho.
Yeah, another chat. This is a question. I'm not too sure on this one. As a Dutchman, I hope Ten Hag becomes our national team coach after the upcoming Euros. Do you know how long his contract is, by the way? Is it a lengthy one? I hope it's a lengthy one because I want him to stay at Manchester United. I don't know if you know what I mean.
He signed a 3-year deal, didn't he? So what is he?
Yeah.
He's getting towards the point where you would have to start
conversations.
Conversations start about whether you want to extend.
This is a big season, isn't it?
It is. It's massive. It's massive for a number of reasons, but particularly with stuff like that Ten Hag's stock, as things stand, is relatively high. So it's only natural that the Dutch national team, possibly Real Madrid. Real Madrid are going to be looking for a manager to replace Carlo Ancelotti if he goes to Brazil. You look around Europe, where else are you going to get a top manager to manage Real Madrid? I'm sure that he's on their list somewhere, and that really should be a worry for Man United.
Yep. Pauline Brooks from another super chat. Sancho needs to be reminded talent needs to be backed with hard work. The manager over any player every day. Find him and bin him off. There's a few people backing Sancho are saying that every player deserves to defend themselves, understand all of that. There's ways of doing it, and there's ways of doing it at United, I would say, that just don't go down well. Talked about the players there, Rashford, Garnacho, and the list of players there that have been disciplined already by Ten Hag. And you mentioned there about, I think it was another one of your articles, which was saying the players all understand the hard approach from Ten Hag and are comfortable with it. And I think some are not sympathetic to Jadon Sancho's cause. Do we know if there is any sort of player rift or anything going on in the background? Do you feel like the players would ultimately go with Ten Hag, having seen what he's done with bigger players before, and go, right, this is it, this is United, this isn't like it used to be anymore? The players aren't going to have the power. Yeah,
and because of that, it is a little bit of a line in the sand moment. That it's all well and good to talk about discipline and stuff, but when it really comes to the crunch, you have to be able to back it up with your actions. And so far, Ten Hag has done that. And I go back to a mixed zone interview we did with Fernandez, I think, in Australia, in Ten Hag's first summer, where he said that the discipline that was really needed from Ten Hag when he came in. That was the most important thing that Fernandez thought that he could do, was to come in. He said that standards had slipped. People had started being late and not dressing in the right way, not turning up to training at the right time. Standards in training had dropped, and the most important thing that Ten Hag had done was to sort these standards out. And even a year on, when we talked to him in San Diego, he was still talking about these standards. He wasn't talking particularly about style of play. He wasn't trying to sort of bang the drum and say we're going to win the Premier League. The thing he wanted to talk about was standards every day, because for him that's where it all starts. You can't talk about winning the Premier League if your standards aren't right. And so, again, this is a key moment, and most of the players have bought into it. Fernandez in particular, which is why he's captain, but also the likes of Luke Shaw has been quite vocal about the standards that he's brought with him. Casemiro is another one, even though he's relatively new to the club, has talked about it. So this is something that's very prevalent within the squad. It's something that they're all very aware of. And I'm sure that they're all going to be looking at this. Most of the players are the same as you and I, talking about stuff like this behind the scenes, talking about this with the friends and other teammates and stuff. There will be an awful lot of eyes on this. And essentially, it doesn't really matter what happens from a fan perspective or from a journalist perspective. This matters from a player's perspective, because players will be looking at this and wondering how he's going to handle this, because ultimately it sets the tone for the rest of the season. Is this kind of thing going to be allowed, or is it going to be stamped out straight away?
That's it. I mean, the three highest paid players at the football club from last season, all under Ten Hag factor right now. Ronaldo, David De Gea, and now Jadon Sancho. I'm not putting everything together. I'm not trying to stir the pot or anything like that, but he's one of full-on authority to me, and it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what wage you're on, what price tag you wear. He's come in, and like you said, he's trying to set a new culture at Manchester United, and that's how I see it. I cannot see a way back for Jadon Sancho from this as a fan. I just can't. For everything that you just said, everything that everyone else is saying, the way the fan base is, he hasn't been playing well enough anyway, so no one's really got any patience for him. I feel like that's where, the players within the squad, they know what Ten Hag's about. So does Jadon Sancho. They'd have seen that he had all his time off. Well, they were busting a gut travelling around Europe while he was getting this extra treatment from him. So I would understand if some of the players were like, sorry, mate, you're on your own with this one.
Yeah, I mean, there are two things there. Firstly, from a fan perspective, that I don't think Sancho's got the credit in the bank with his performances to make fans go, well, hang on a minute. If he'd been fantastic for the best part of 2 years, I think a lot of fans may go, well, hang on a minute, maybe that is a little bit unfair. He's been absolutely slogging his guts out every week. He's scored all these goals. He's made all these assists. The guy deserves some credit. I don't think the majority of fans have seen that from him, which makes it very easy for the fans to, in situations like this, to turn on him. And in terms of where the power lies at Old Trafford, again, this isn't a situation like, say, Real Madrid, where, a massive player is going head-to-head with their manager, and some of their fans are thinking, oh, Real Madrid are quite quick to get rid of managers. I wonder whether they're going to side with the player here or side with the manager. United have pumped so much power into Ten Hag and give him so much authority that they have to back him. That whatever Ten Hag decides with this, the club have to back him. And that stretches from anywhere from leaving him on the bench for a couple of weeks to saying he can't be in my group now, he's got to go. Really, the man in charge at Old Trafford, ever since he walked through the door, has been Ten Hag, and the club so far have been happy to let that happen. So in terms of who holds the power in all this, it's most definitely Ten Hag.
Yeah, it does feel like the football club have gone, this is the last chance saloon with Ten Hag. This is how it feels looking at it. It's like, I don't know where we go from here if Ten Hag isn't at the football club, personally. No. Like you just said then, the amount of power that Ten Hag has been given by the club, and we've seen that. We've seen what he's done, how he's treated people. We've seen how he's changed this tour from his first tour, and how crazy and impossible it was to pretty much manage the last tour in America. He has full power over everything, doesn't he? And it's like, if I was a player at the football club, I'd be fearing turning in late at the moment. It feels like he has got that power and that authority.
And that's exactly what he wants, and that's exactly the right approach. That in any workplace, the guy in charge, the boss, has to have that authority. The people that work for you have to want to hit those standards. It's more important at a football club than probably in any other business that you haven't got any room for error. It's all very well for journalists and people to sit in front of the manager and start saying, "Oh, when are you going to catch City? When are you going to win the title? When are you going to win the Champions League?" Again, all that for Ten Hag starts with little things like turning up on time for training. And when you view this Sancho situation through that, that's when you realise how much trouble Sancho could be in, because in Ten Hag's eyes, he'll be looking at this thinking, well, it's really important that I get this right if this team ever does want to win a Premier League title. That's how important it is. I mean, you can't make a straight line between, dumping Sancho and then obviously then we'll win the Premier League. It's not as simple as that, but for him, it starts at these kind of standards. That's why it's so important he gets it right.
That's it. Keep your comments coming in, guys. We've got another one here from Colostevio says, look at Polina, missed his big move to Bayern and hasn't said a word. It's all about mentality, and this club needs strong mentality. That has been something that I've been banging the drum on. It's like the weak mentality, the poor away records, being able to wear that United shirt It weighs heavy. It weighs very heavy, and I think players realise it very quickly when they turn up at United that it isn't simply just moving to another club and carrying on as you were. The expectation level is higher. I think that's what Ten Hag realised straight away. First thing I remember him saying in his press conference was, United need to be winning every game. United need to be competing at the top, but it is going to take a bit of time. And I think he realised that at the start of last season, when we're walking out of Brentford thinking this completely needs an overhaul, and he did. He changed everything. He saw, in my opinion, I think he took away Ten Hag ball just to adapt this team to getting through result-wise, because there was no real style of play last year. We're still not seeing it this year, and we are struggling still, but I can still see glimmers of hope in certain performances. Like there was a bit in the Arsenal game. I thought we were unlucky in that game. It wasn't a 3-1 game, but I think he's just, with the pressure, for me personally, again, talking about this, is the pressure of Manchester United, what's going on off the pitch, and him being the only one who speaks to any media. I feel like he's just found it very tough at the start of this season personally. I don't know if you felt that. Has he been a bit more tetchy in press conferences? Has he been a bit shorter?
No. I mean, I felt that he looked and sounded relatively relaxed during the summer, particularly when they got Onana in, and then they moved relatively quickly to tie up Højlund. I think once those two deals had been done, that he looked noticeably more relaxed. But you are right that it's all about results at Man United, and the problem is that as great as your project can be and as much progress as you've made, the fans need to see it on the pitch with the results. And as things stand right now, they've lost 2 of the first 4 games, and they've got a little bit of a horrible run coming up after the international break. So I've learned at United that things can unravel very, very quickly. And there are elements of this summer that felt a little bit like Mourinho's summer in 2018, when they'd come off the back of quite a good season. The transfer window was okay, but it wasn't fantastic. It was a little bit underwhelming. But gradually things just unravelled to the point where in December, Mourinho had to leave. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's the case with Ten Hag, and I think that the biggest difference between that situation and this one is that Ten Hag, I think, very much still has the dressing room on his side, and Mourinho never had that. But it's just a lesson in that optimism around a club like Man United can disappear very, very quickly, and you need to keep winning, and you need to keep securing results. And if you look at the start of the season that they've had this year, and then after the international break, they've got Brighton at home, which is obviously a very difficult game. They're away at Bayern, the first Champions League game for a year. Obviously, again, a very difficult game. And then away at Burnley on a Saturday night at Turf Moor. They are 3 very, very tricky games anyway, but particularly tricky when the team aren't playing particularly well, and you've got this whole hurricane of mess off the pitch. It just feels at the moment like a very, very dangerous
Feels like a volcano.
It does. And obviously that will settle down. If they can go and smash Brighton 3-0, it'll settle down. You go and get a great result at Bayern, it settles down. And that's the power of results. Whatever's happening off the field with Sancho and anything else, results will always settle it down. The flip side of that, though, if they were to go these next 3 games without winning any of them, then
it's 2 wins from 7.
Well, it is. I mean, that you get into the point where it is sort of crisis mode a little bit. United are a club. You're never more than 1 game away from a crisis. United fans will know that from the minute they started supporting them. 2 wins from 7, that is shaky. And the questions will start to be asked, and then it just snowballs, and it's very, very difficult to get out of that when momentum is against you. That Brighton game is just monumental now in terms of what's happened off the pitch, the results that have happened already this season. They need to win that Brighton game. If they don't, then you start to worry.
Yep. I want to move on from Sancho quickly, but was there any interest on deadline day from the Saudis and Turkish leagues? Was there anything there genuine?
There was talks with Al Ettifaq, Steven Gerrard's team. I think it was very, very brief. I think it was only born out of the situation. It wasn't something that was on their radar at all. I think it was a conversation that was had because of what had happened after Arsenal. I don't think United knocked it back straight away, which probably tells you everything you need to know about how they're viewing this situation. But the terms of the deal were never good enough to get anywhere near it being a done deal. So obviously the Saudi deadline's passed now, and he stayed put. It's highly unlikely that anyone in Turkey, even though their window is still open, anyone in Turkey, even the big three, would be able to afford his wages. So I'd be amazed now if Sancho isn't here for the first half of this season, which, again, gives Ten Hag a very, very big decision to make about whether he's allowed to be reintegrated back into the squad and be a useful body in terms of numbers, or whether he needs to make such a big point that he says, you're going to go and train with the reserves for 4 months, which he did with Eric Bailly. People will forget Eric Bailly came back in the summer, got told he wasn't going on tour, said he wasn't part of the plans, came back to Carrington, still didn't have a move, got told he was training with the reserves. The European window's finished and still got told he was training with the reserves, wasn't coming back in, and eventually got a move to Besiktas on a free transfer. That's how harsh Ten Hag can be.
That's it. I mean, to me, I just look at it and the amount of problems it brings with this is like Rashford being Sancho's best mate, one of United's best performers last season, the pin-up boy for the football club, and like his relationship and how it might affect him and other players around, not just Rashford. I think I look at it and I worry for him, and I think if he had a chance, we knew if the right offer was coming in the summer, he would have gone Sancho. Yeah. That pretty much says everything you need to know for me. The fact that he can't find a position for him in the team, trying him at false 9, he's tried him at 10, left, right. He just never worked. He was bought as a right winger. He doesn't fit in, and obviously... Well,
he's not Ten Hag's man, is he? He's not a Ten Hag. He was a player that Ten Hag inherited, so it's not as if he's gone out and spent 73 million on him and can't find a place. He's, every single player who a new manager inherits is always at risk because he's not their man. Obviously, there are some players like Varane and Rashford who have done well enough to win over the manager, and the manager saw, you've got a place in my team. Sancho just hasn't done that.
That's it, exactly that. A player that has been playing ahead of him, and we don't like to talk about horrible things, but is what United is at the moment. Antony didn't play bad against Arsenal, but the whirlwind of, let's just describe it as a nightmare situation after the game has escalated to a point he's come out now. We just need to let everyone know where we're at update-wise and everything like this. If anything else has changed, has anything else come out of the club regarding Antony's statement-wise, or are we stuck at stalemate again, waiting for more news to come from the relative authorities before United actually do anything?
Yeah, I mean, again, United are in a very, very difficult position with this, as they were with Mason Greenwood. That I think that the problem that United have got was that Brazil made the decision to drop him from their squad after those fresh allegations were made by his former girlfriend on the Monday. Because Brazil have decided to drop him and send him home from international duty, my personal view is that United then had to make a decision about whether he is still available for them to train and to play matches. And that is the thing at the moment that is up in the air. Obviously, United are in a difficult position in terms of what kind of statement they can put out. Obviously, they acknowledged the accusations in a statement earlier this week. I think the mistake that they made was not clarifying whether he is now available or unavailable. You have to believe, I suppose, that because they've not said anything, that he remains available for selection as things stand right now. And I certainly don't advocate that people should be suspended right off the bat after allegations are made. It's a police matter. There are investigations ongoing in Brazil and Manchester, and those police investigations need to be allowed to be played out in a timely manner, and it's not for United to get involved in that. I think, though, that because Brazil made that quite a big call to drop him from their squad, that when that decision has been made, that almost forces United's hand a little bit, and they need to clarify whether he is now available or not. At the moment, that question's been asked a number of times, and United have said no comment. So there's no guidance at all about whether he is available to be selected against.
Do we know if he's been sent back home, having been kicked out of the Brazil squad, or is he still in Brazil?
No, I mean the latest on that is that I've spoken to someone that is part of his representative group today and said, when is he expected back? And they said they didn't know that information yet. So that again is up in the air. It's another thing that is contributing to all these issues off the field. I mean, obviously in this instance, these are quite strong accusations made by not just one, but now multiple women that need to be investigated and dealt with appropriately.
Do you feel like that will push United over the edge to make a decision that it's not just one source now? It's coming from a few different parties now. A lot of people are actually asking that in the chat, saying that as well. Well, I said like you, obviously one woman's come out and said something, and you shouldn't really just sort of suspend the player because of an accusation. He's not been charged, but 2, 3 starts to get a bit concerning now.
I mean, I don't think that you need to change your policy or change the way you deal with it because there are multiple accusations. I mean, one accusation is strong enough to, if you want to suspend someone, then you're well within your rights. It's a valid point that he's not been. These accusations have been made and been made in Brazil and in Manchester. What he's not been arrested yet, or not been arrested. Sorry, he's not been charged. So in terms of whether he should be suspended or not, I think you could probably make a case for both. I think that the problem, again, like I say, United, because Brazil have taken that step to release him from their squad, I think United then should have said whether he is available for selection or not. The fact that they've said no comment suggests, again, that is up in the air and that decision has not yet been made. But I think the most important thing from all of this, from all these accusations, is that the accusations are treated very seriously and get dealt with and investigated in the right way. Really with stuff like this, the football and whether he's allowed to train or play is really secondary to all this.
That's it, yeah, it is, and we'll bring up updates on that situation as and when it comes. But moving on from that, I've seen ESPN articles saying no news on takeovers and stuff like that. We had the fluctuation of the share price the other day at fair that the Glazers weren't selling up. In terms of where we stand with that, the transfer window's gone now, so everyone's thinking, right, okay, the calmness and the budget and the financing side of that is out of the way. Can things now be moved forward? Takeover-wise, is there anything or any other news? Has anyone reached out from ESPN to any of the Sir Jim Ratcliffe or Qatari parties?
I mean, in terms of what the bidders know, they are under the impression that the club is still for sale. The Qataris put their sort of, I think, was it fifth and final bid in months ago now, and said that we weren't going to engage in the process beyond that. The offer is still on the table, which it is, but they haven't been told that the club has been taken off the market. They haven't been told that the review of the strategic alternatives that the Glazers termed is over. So as far as they know, it's still ongoing. I mean, it's, again, you're talking about more frustration off the field, really. There's no real reason why this shouldn't have been completed months ago. The Qataris in particular are of a mind that they don't think that the club really were ever for sale, that Ray and the Rain Group were asked to sell something that perhaps was never really on the market. It was interesting, there was a message that came back from people inside United while we were away on tour, just reminding everyone that, again, the Glazers never said explicitly that it was a sale, that the sale was one of a number of options that would be considered. So they were quite keen to point out to us that it wasn't as if they said, we are selling United, and now they've kind of backtracked, that it was always considered to be one of the options and not the only option. The difficulty is for the Glazers is that as far as I can tell, saying they're not going to do anything is not an option. They're either going to have to sell or they're going to have to accept outside investment. The entire reason why this process started was because they didn't have the money to redevelop Old Trafford and Carrington, and that's still the case.
And that's the worry, I think, with all Manchester United fans. We've seen how much we have struggled to finance the transfers this season. We've struggled continuously year after year to bring money in through selling players. That investment, if it does come in and the Glazers are still on charge, where does that investment go? I mean, there's Old Trafford, which is going to cost an absolute fortune. A training ground exactly the same. And the people that we're talking about, we had your colleague Mark on, who was talking about these hedge funds people who are brutal.
Yeah.
They don't care about football. They don't care about fans.
Nope.
They're lending money to the Glazers. They want it back by hook or by crook. and that doesn't matter. And they don't care how that money comes back. They don't care about football history or anything. That is the danger which is coming our way if they don't sell right now.
And that is true. There's been a kind of a speculation that what company or what investment group would want to be tarred with the Glazers brush, like who would want to be in partnership with the Glazers. Well, the hedge funds don't care.
Yeah,
they want the money back. They want an investment and they want the money back. So that option is still there for the Glazers. Those offers again are still on the table. And we were told that the stadium redevelopment was going to take between 800 million and 2 billion, depending on what plan they chose, depending on how big the redevelopment was. So you're talking about a massive amount of money. It's not like they can accept 100 million for a really minority share. They're talking about taking a huge amount of money on board from these investment groups. If you're talking about redeveloping the entire stadium, you need someone to put in 2 billion, which gives you quite a lot of control over the club. So, it's a massive decision for the Glazers to make. My personal feeling is that was always the Glazers' intention. That particularly Joel and Avram never really had a huge intention to sell. They left it open as an option because they knew that they had to, but their preference all along was to accept outside investment and to allow them to stay. Because why would you go? If you're completely immune from the criticism, which they are, it doesn't really register at all. The protests don't really register. They're allowed to take dividends out whenever they want. It's this big cash cow sat there that they're just stripping months and months after each other. Why would you get rid of it? And you look at it, and if the stadium was redeveloped and they could develop a winning team, something that's worth 5 billion now could be worth 10 billion in 10 years.
But it's how we create that winning team when all I can see is that extra investment coming in is just saddling the club with more debt. It's like, how do you pay off? If anyone is going to invest that amount of money, like you said, they're going to be all over it. They're going to be continuously wanting to know how this money is paid back. We're struggling to pay back the interest now and afford to invest into the actual infrastructure of Manchester United. Now, anyone who comes in now and borrows the Glazers money, we're not going to gain money back from redeveloping Old Trafford. It's not going to make the team any better. It's not going to give Ten Hag any more tools to make Manchester United compete with the Madrids, Bayerns, Barcelonas, and dare I say it, the Man Cities of this world right now in the way they have. So, again, speaking as a fan, I fear that investment with the Glazers in charge is a recipe for absolute disaster for this football.
I mean, in fairness, that's not strictly true in that if you redevelop the stadium and made it like a properly like one of the best stadiums in the world, that your revenue would increase.
Other sporting events and stuff, bringing the money elsewhere.
More fans in the stadium, more fans buying hot dogs and beer and stuff and everything. So it does all like that. Match day revenue is a huge part of United's income, and so if the stadium was better and bigger, that you would like to think, I'm not saying you would make 2 billion back on it, but you would begin to make more money back on, and you have to look at a club like Arsenal, for example, or Spurs. Arsenal are in a situation now where for an awful long time, because they self-financed that stadium, they couldn't really spend in the transfer market. But now that that's all been paid off, they're in a position now where they are very, very competitive in the transfer market. And you only have to look at what they've done this season, this summer with Declan Rice and Timber and Havertz to see that. So it would help United revenue-wise. But I understand fans' concern that, that you're talking about the Glazer ownership and the problem that most United fans have got with it is the debt that they've hung around the club's neck, and is this going to be £2 billion more of more debt? I can understand that because, again, you go back to the body of work and all the evidence that we've got about the Glazers. The Glazers don't really care. They don't care about the amount of debt that the club has, as long as A, it's functioning, and B, they're still able to take money out. So it is a worry. It's a worry. Any scenario that doesn't involve the Glazers leaving completely is a worry.
Yeah, it would be, I think, the way a lot of United fans look at it, the way I do, it's like they're getting the extra investment coming in. That pretty much is another 2 decades of Glazer ownership in our eyes.
It's possible.
Because there's no way, like you said, stadiums take 5-6 years to build.
Yeah.
Redeveloping Old Trafford is a minefield, as we know, because of the infrastructure around it. How long that takes, when are we going to start seeing that money? Some fans will be sat here thinking right now, what the hell, am I actually going to be alive before I start seeing that Arsenal scenario?
No, I mean, and you're right. The only way, and I believe this for a long time, the only way that Man United fans can get rid of the Glazers is by cutting off their revenue source. And that means never going to games, boycotting every single United fan, boycotting every single game, not buying stuff from the megastore, not buying shirts, not buying anything, and also boycotting sponsors, all of them, to the point where they don't want to be involved. And that's a really, really hard thing to tell Man United fans, because why would you?
Yeah.
You can't ask an 8-year-old kid not to have a Man United shirt with Rashford on his back, or you can't go to the game tomorrow because we're boycotting it. How would you explain that to an 8-year-old kid?
It takes me straight back, and I get asked that question all the time as a season ticket holder for years now. I have to answer it as like saying, it's like, what did they call us? The generational fans. When the Super League was being taken over, we're the generational fans, and we're just going to fill them seats with tourists like they know they can do every week. Because I was in the sit-in for the Forest game. I walked out, and there must have been 1,000 people queuing for the megastore at the same time. And
I've covered these protests before, where I've seen a protester argue with another protester because the protester had a megastore bag.
Yeah.
But he's got a kid with him. The kid's gone in and he wants to buy a United shirt. Like, try and explain to a 5-year-old kid what a leveraged buyout is. The problem is, and this is the only business that this is true of, that if you have Shreddies for your breakfast, and then Shreddies say, right, it's going to be £10 a pop now. You go, I'm not going to buy Shreddies anymore. I'm going to go and buy Cheerios, and that's fine. You eat Cheerios. No Man United fan is going to go, I'm not supporting you. I'm going to go and support City.
Yeah. It
doesn't work.
No.
You've got a captive audience, an audience who, with the best will in the world, are not going anywhere.
Yeah.
United could put the season ticket prices up 25%, and they would still fill it. They won't, because they would get a lot of bad press, but they could do, and they would still fill it. You could make the cost of a shirt 200 quid, and they would still sell them, because fandom of a football club, particularly in this country, is for life, and that is exactly what they're relying on. And they know that is never, ever, ever going away.
That is it. Quickly before we finish up, that hold off in any sort of extra investment coming in, interest rates, the way the banking world is at the moment, could there be any truth in the fact that they're waiting this out to see if it comes down to get a better deal for them to leverage that in? It's
possible. I mean, with all stuff like this, those kind of factors affect it. I mean, it's interesting that the last time that I spoke to the outside, the hedge fund, the guys that were running the hedge funds who were interested in putting money in, they felt, and this was towards the end of last season, so it is a couple of months now, were saying that they thought that that the Glazers probably wouldn't have gone so far down the line with the Qataris and Radcliffe if they were expected to take outside investment now. Obviously, we're talking about having another couple of months down the line now. So it's anyone's guess. I think the only people that know exactly what they're going to do is the Glazers. Everyone else, bidders, outside investors, journalists, fans, everyone else is in the dark.
That's it. They are very, very quiet on the situation. The one thing the Glazers are good at is keeping conversation to themselves and not letting the outside world know what is going on. But guys, that pretty much wraps up the show. The chat has been immense. I've seen you talking about it. Continue that on when the video goes up on YouTube later, guys. Let me know what you think on the Sancho, the Antony and the takeover talk that me and Rob have been talking about here. Rob, thanks for coming on. Absolute pleasure, as always.
Have me back on when they've like 110 on the bounce.
Yeah, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll make an interview straight after the Bayern game if we win, with you specifically, just to talk about something positive, mate.
That'd be
we'll
great,
do that. But yeah, guys, super chats and comments, brilliant as always, like I said. Don't forget to give the video a like, hit the subscribe button as well on your way out of here. We'll be back later on tonight with any updates that come out. But enjoy international break. That's what it's supposed to be for, letting loose a little bit and calming down from the day-to-day of domestic football. But yeah, this is United, people. This is United Stand. We'll see you later on, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.